Peter Thiel, go ahead, check out what we're saying.
Check out our music.
Check out our music. I need the Teal bucks. I know you're into this whole downtown avant-garde funding things, covert, where's my
Yeah,
money?
exactly.
Oh yeah, check out the Patreon.
Check out the Patreon. I'll move to Dime Square, whatever you want, dude. Like, is that a real place?
Talk to me. Tell me you're fine. Talk to go. It's 9:30.
All right, all right, all right. Critical Listening, episode 8. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Max Alper.
Welcome back. I'm Liz Pelly.
Liz, we got another doozy today. With us, we have our dear friend, musician, composer, educator, activist,
Curator.
curator. Yeah, that's right. We got to throw in curator there. Amirtha Kidambi coming to us live from Brooklyn. She's been doing a lot.
I was so excited that Amirtha was down to be a guest on the show. Yeah, this was a great conversation. I know that you and Amirtha are old friends. I had interviewed her years ago for Bandcamp Daily about her band Elder Ones, and it was a conversation that always really stuck with me. So I was excited to get the chance to talk to her on the record again.
Yeah, she's so much fun. She was a guest speaker for my Patreon class, the Group Critique Fight Club, years ago. And just like in our interview with her for this show, we had to call it on time because it just could go on. And if we allowed it to go on and we allowed ourselves to just continue to talk, it would enter Joe Rogan experience levels of podcast length, which I don't think anyone wants, but it's always a pleasure speaking to her. She has some big things happening right now. She just released a duo record entitled Neti Neti. It was produced by our very own Nick Zanka, right?
Shout out to Nick, who is the producer of this show and also the producer of that record.
Yes, absolutely. Producer, composer, writer extraordinaire, Nick Zanka. What else has Amirtha been up to?
This season, Amirtha also has been rolling out the first few episodes of a podcast of her own called Outer National that she's created as part of her residency at Pioneer Works that is having some really incredible mind expanding conversations about sort of like what it means for music to be borderless. So we talked about that
Mm,
show and how it connects to her work more broadly. And I definitely, yeah, recommend checking out the episodes of that show that are published so far as well.
absolutely. And she also is one of the co-curators of this year's Le Guess Who festival in the Netherlands, Utrecht, right? And that is happening right around now when you're listening to this, dear listener, in early November. That goes from, I believe, November 6th through November 9th. So this was really an awesome bill of artists that Amirtha had played a big part in putting together this year, which is fantastic. And I definitely recommend folks go and check out the official La Guess Who YouTube channel where they have a short sort of mini doc and interview with Amirtha talking about her practice, both as performer and educator, and in this case, formally a curator. I think this is a really great conversation because it really hammers home the point that we've been making about how music is social, right? And Amirtha is a huge inspiration for me as artist and educator um, on maintaining a social practice and not shying away from politics, both in your work, specifically what your work is about, but also just being a person in the world, existing as an artist, with the state of affairs as they are, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I hope that everyone listens to this full conversation. There's one moment that really resonated with me and stuck with me after, which was kind of this part in the conversation that I feel like really broadens the context and connected some dots in terms of like what we mean when we talk about sort of existing in an era of like mass dehumanization and the role of music and sort of trying to counter that. So I feel like that kind of like connected some dots there. And yeah, I hope people listen to the whole conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Music as weaponized rehumanization, let's say, you know.
Yeah.
I think just to actively seek that in your work is incredibly important, and I hope it's inspirational for those that are are feeling a little bit lost as to how they can, just little old me as an artist in the world, try to navigate, take your pick, state of affairs, in various fields, and how do I use my art and my platform, whether it be big or small, to combat this. And I think that sometimes it really just comes down to just keep going, keep playing, keep doing this, and be conscious of these things, and not to put your head in the sand, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I also just like loved hearing about her background as well too. Like in it's like such like a New York City conversation. And I appreciate it.
Totally. And Bay Area, right?
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
California conversation as well for her origins, her initial origins. Yeah, absolutely. I always thought it was fascinating hearing, specifically about her inspiration from the AACM, and also which is taking inspiration from the Black Panthers, as far as like what radical music pedagogy can be. Again, huge inspiration to me personally as a teacher. Um, Everything is ideological, whether we are conscious of it or not. So we might as well be conscious and combat the the evils that are seem to be encroaching in various fields, including our own in music, right?
And framing it all, not to give away the entire conversation or just, but like, I loved how she really framed so much of what she does as just like in the spirit of consciousness raising, or
Yeah,
as all of these different types of tools of consciousness raising. Yeah,
yeah,
that really stuck with me too from this conversation.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, let's get on to it then. Episode 8, Critical Listening with Amirtha Kidambi. Let's go. Mirth, how are you? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on to Critical Listening.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'd love to just start off by just getting to know you, even though we know each
Mm-hmm.
other quite well. But for everybody else, just to know a bit of your history as a performer and composer, and in particularly your story of how you went from uh, classically trained
Mm-hmm.
opera, right? Opera, or
Yeah,
just, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
like that's kind of the meat of the Western classical vocal
That's right.
thing. So
That's
you kind
right.
of can't
Can't
avoid
avoid
it.
it. Can't avoid it. So, how did you go from classically trained opera singer who found themselves in this realm of what we would call creative music? And for those that don't know that definition, oftentimes we would call that improvised avant-garde music that is rooted in both the Afrological music theory
Oh,
and politics. To
George
quote, to quote,
Lewis.
exactly, I got to quote my George Lewis in there, flex a little my stripes.
Yeah. Well, it's probably it's like a typical kind of immigrant thing where you're not encouraged to pursue or study music, at least in the Indian American community, and especially if you're like coming from a working class background, it's even more like your responsibility is to like do something that's going to uplift the entire family, right?
Right.
And so yeah, I was never encouraged towards music, like even in Indian music, like I sang like in the community, like the folk, it's called bhajan, which is like we know from Alice Coltrane's records. So I grew up with that, and I like my parents like put me in a classical Indian dance class called Bharatanatyam, but I never did that growing up, but all my music education was just through school, like through public school. And so I could like read music and things. And once it came time to like study music, my parents were super like very against it. And I just kind of was like, I don't care. I'm applying to music programs, but I didn't know anyone who had studied music, and I didn't know anything about what it meant to study music. So I kind of just ended, I was like doing these auditions, like, which I was like, what do they mean an aria? Or what did they like all the requirements, I was just literally on the fly. Like I worked at Baskin Robbins, and I was just like using my paycheck to like get like 3 voice lessons before I had to audition. And that's where I was like, oh, wait, when they say voice or when they say music, I guess most places implicitly are saying like European, Western classical music. And then I ended up getting a scholarship at Loyola Marymount in LA, which is just a liberal arts college. And it was like the only way my parents would let me study music was because they like was paying for college.
Yeah.
But it just was like implicitly they only had a classical program, and so I was very naive. Like I really didn't know that that's what it meant. And so I kind of got my other stuff in by like I had a post rock band that was called Sequins and Skeletons when I lived in LA, that like I was always part of DIY scenes and things like that. And I worked at KXLU, which is a quite a renowned like independent radio station in Los Angeles. So I had this show called The Modern Age, and a lot of like my research of like just getting to know about avant and experimental music was through this show that was like kind of pan experimental music across like many different avant-gardes. And I would go to Amoeba, and I could like take stuff from the radio station to sell to Amoeba, and then I would like pick up, like I was picking up free jazz records. I was just starting to get into Cecil and Albert Eiler, and so it was kind of a combination of like self-education in that, and then my friend group of like who I had the band with. And then yeah, I think the more I was getting deep into all these and like experimental like music like from the DIY scene in New York, like that was you
Right.
know, the beginning of YouTube. I was just like, I don't know if they were on Arctic videos yet, but there were all these videos of DIY shows from New York, or like Tonic, or yeah, Silent Bar and Death by Audio, and of bands like Extra Life and Dirty Projectors and Z's and all these and Little Women and bands like this. And so it was kind of like I knew I wasn't going to be a classical singer, but then when you kind of like you do 4 years of education in it, and then everybody's like, okay, now you have to do this. So then it was like, how do I move to New York? And the best way I could like convince myself like to have a reason to make such a leap from I was in LA to New York City was for school. It was like the most justified, like to again with the parents, they have a hold on us, and many of
Hmm.
our cultures. Was to be like, oh, I'm going to go to grad school. And then it's like, what am I trained in? What am I qualified to do? It's like classical singing. And then it's like kind of repeats again. But um, did you ever take a class with Salim Washington at Brooklyn College?
I did not. That he came a little bit after my undergrad, and then obviously for grad school, I was fully in the sonic arts, so wasn't doing much performance stuff then. But I've heard good things.
Yeah, he's a tenor saxophonist, and he was a Fulbright scholar, and he had this awesome class called Jazz Musicians as Intellectuals, and it was like the first class I took at Brooklyn College. So like we were reading he was assigning like George Lewis's book. We read A Power Stronger Than Itself about the AACM. We read like Fred Ho's writing because he played in Fred Ho's Afro-Asian
Right,
ensemble.
right.
It's like all this like Marxist, anti-imperialist like writing by jazz musicians. And just like for me, I think that was the very formative thing. Like it was always kind of a political awakening meets the aesthetic, my aesthetic inclinations and all of that, because it was like, wait, I want to do my own thing. I want to like find my community. And I think, Max, you very well know, the Sweat Lodge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, Liz. Liz has brought on many people that she's hung out with and done plenty of interviewing with in the past on her end. So now it's my time to shine. Me and Mirth.
It's Maxie Boy's time.
I'm loving this. I was literally thinking, I was like, oh, this is what Max has been experiencing on every other episode of the show so far. Yes, loving it though. Continue, please.
Well, yeah,
Yes, explain the Sweat Lodge for the people.
the Sweat Lodge, basically, we were a bunch of dorks in this like classical music program at Brooklyn College, like in master's program. Some of us were masters, some of us were undergrad, and we were like, I was so inspired by the AACM of like this model of collectivity where everyone is a composer, everyone is a performer. Improvisation is like such a big part of the ethos, but it's also like they were very engaged with the community because it was being modeled on the Black Panther Party, essentially. Like they had food programs, they had free music lessons. That's how like George Lewis, who's now the chair of composition at Columbia, like that was his school, was this community. And so I think like through that, Corey Bracken, if folks know him and as a real adult, was like we were like writing manifestos.
You mean the vibraphonist of American football?
Yes, exactly. He like we were writing like manifestos, like political manifestos about like taking the art outside of the institution. And like we had something called Performers Forum that was part of like a Sweat Lodge programming, but it was a group of us, like Dave Reuter, who I've done the Robert Ashley pieces with, our friend Ellen O'Mara, who passed away, 6 years
6 years
ago,
ago.
which is really crazy. And Joe White and Ian Monroe, and we were all like, it was kind of just to play each other's music, but it was also to kind of foster a community. And we had this space that was it made no sense, called Exapno on 33 Flatbush Avenue, which like now if you go there, it's like there's an Apple store there.
Downtown Brooklyn, like full like death skyscrapers now.
Yeah, the death scrapers are there. And what was so crazy was called, this space was called Exapno. And it was like a month, it was these new music folks started it, and you could pay like a monthly thing to use it as like a co-working space and maybe sometimes rehearse and like, but it was like a full fifth floor of this massive industrial building in downtown Brooklyn. So we were like, oh, we could put on shows here. We could put on events here. And so we were like splitting a membership that was probably only like $70 a month or something among 5 people. And to like put on concerts, do panels. We did panels, or just like discussions. Like we had Darius Jones, like because he was in Little Women. We had Robert Ashley come by. We had
Wild.
like Jessica Pavone and just like different people from the community, where we're like, it would be cool for artists to talk about their practice and us to hang out and drink a handle of Evan Williams whiskey and like make baked goods and like hang. And what was very interesting about that building, sorry, it's like a long preamble, but I swear to God, it's all related. Um, Occupy Wall Street, the organizers operated out of 33 Flatbush. And so it was such an interesting, this would be like 2011
Yeah.
when we kind of started doing this. And it was very formative, but it was like all about this kind of DIY community ethos. We didn't have the capital to like start a venue or something, but this was like our hack, was to split a $70 membership 5 ways and do everything we wanted to do that we weren't, at school. Like we were just kind of like, yeah, school is school, but we wanted to find like alternatives. And that's kind of how I started making my own music. was through that, because I kind of had been in bands. I was in Seven Tears with Charlie Looker, but nothing of like my own yet. And that little collective was where I felt like the courage, because it was just our thing to start making like my own songs and having my friends play them. Because as a performer in the classical world, you're just told you're like not a creative agent. You don't have any agency. And
Right.
the more I started improvising and started writing stuff for that group, then it started to grow into eventually writing for Elder Ones, my band. And yeah, then it was just improvising was a way to meet people. That's maybe the easiest way I can say that I got into creative music. Was it was like, hey, do you like Max Jaffe, who was the first
Yep.
drummer of Elder Ones? I just like, he was friends with my roommate who I met on Craigslist, who went to the new school. And I saw, she was like, hey, you should come see my band. I saw her band and I was like, oh my God, who's this drummer? And so I was like, hey, do you want to improvise together sometime? So that it was like, people would just say yes, always in New York. Like even people like Trevor Dunn, and, like it was just such a way to find community. And so that's kind of how I got from point A to point B.
Yeah. Actually, though, I have one question about that space that you rented that Occupy was also like down the hallway. Would the Occupy people come to your shows, or were any of you involved in Occupy? Was there like cross-pollination between those two?
Yeah, I was involved with Occupy, not like as a full-on Zuccotti Park person,
Mhm.
but I was going to a lot of actions, and like it was more or like organic, like just talking to them, yeah, inviting them to stuff. And it was so many different, I mean, it's like kind of autonomous people, but there were so many people coming in and out. So it was almost just like the shared building was this interesting place we were colliding, and it was just such a time, it was such like a moment in time. But they were on a different floor, and so it was not like we were in exact proximity, but it was an important like feature of that building, that there were that kind of things were happening in that weird space.
They don't make buildings like that in New York anymore, where you just got $70 floor rent, partial membership for some weird avant floor collective shared with a radical political group. Like,
Yeah,
come on,
that
man.
wasn't, it doesn't feel that long ago, right?
I
But
know, but it is.
the building got bought by Condé Nast.
Ooh.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so interesting to think about that, because really the hack was that it was a co-working idea. So it was like you were buying a desk for like $70, but we would just stayed after hours. Like
Right.
maybe, Joe White would work at that desk for like working on stuff during the day. And then it would like hit 6 o'clock and we'd all just show up and do our shows.
Loopholes. Loopholes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly.
Someone's
Exactly.
gonna find out where that exists in 2025. Co-working space
If
that no one goes after hours.
Hey, we work, you guys
Mid
don't listen to
Midtown, somewhere
this.
in some decrepit Midtown Manhattan 80s
Yikes.
office building that's barely used anymore or something.
So you mentioned this class that was influential and you called jazz musicians as intellectuals. Was there like a specific text from that class that you feel like really made an impact on you? Would it have been the AACM book?
I mean, they were all like that. There was the AACM book, A Power Stronger Than Itself. There was Horace Tapscott's biography, Songs of the Unsung. That was about the Watts community arts movement. And because
Mm.
I had just moved from LA, it was so powerful to read about like the LA free jazz scene, Pan African People's Orchestra. And, he was doing that during the Watts Rebellion, and was like, yeah, teaching kids in the community. And I taught an after school program in Watts, so it just like was resonating like so deeply for me. Fred Ho's writing about third worldism, third world solidarity, and like, yeah, the Afro-Asian solidarity. Like there was this Eric Porter book, this chapter on Abby Lincoln, which it was,
Oh
and
yeah.
she was in the hospital at the time, and like I actually missed the opportunity to go visit her. I just was like, you're young and you're like so in your, you don't realize like what a thing it is when your professor's like, you should come, come up to Harlem,
Yeah.
and you're just running around. Now I always really regret that. But yeah, it was like, and Abby Lincoln I don't know if people know who she was, but like the Max Roach record, We Insist Freedom Now. She's an incredible vocalist on it. She also had her own music and led bands. But if you've seen the soundtrack to a coup d'etat, which came out about a year ago. In that film, she's one of the people who leads the charge of like all these black women from Harlem to go protest at the UN right after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. So that's like why that class was sort of blowing my mind. I was just like, oh my, and in some contemporary writings like Vijay Iyer's like cognitive writings on cognitive science and improvisation, but it just really was like I was doing a musicology double. So I was really freaking out and being like, why aren't we doing this stuff now? you know?
Totally.
And then Occupy was happening. And then, so it all like, it kind of was resonating with what was going on. And I was just trying to find my place in it myself.
I wanted to ask you also, you have some new music out today, maybe to bring us a little bit more to the present.
Oh, yeah.
You had some new music out today, a track from your new record with your duo, Nettie Nettie,
Yeah.
Matt Evans. And I wanted to ask you about that, but, specifically when I was listening to it this morning, got the press release delivered to my inbox, listening to it, checking it out.
Where's mine?
Sick record.
Thank you.
But it's described as ritual music, and I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about that. I was wondering if you could speak a bit to what ritual music means to you in the year 2025. It sticks right out to me because it often feels like this is a time when a lot of the ritual has really been hollowed out of music.
And culture at large, and at least in the Western world, and in the imperial core where capitalism is religion. Well, the origin of that project actually, it's like goes back to our friend Ellen O'Mara, who I mentioned earlier, who passed away in 2019, and Matt's partner, Devra, the same, like within 6 months of each other, passed away, and we were just starting to get to know each other at that time. Like I knew him, and we had like talked and stuff, but when his partner passed away, I'd kind of written him just being like, really feeling it like empathetically because I was so in my grief still. And we started to meet to talk about grief and just our experience of grief and mourning, even though they were two different people, it was like just like kind of almost like the universal experience of it. And he knew Ellen. He did know Ellen as well, but not as closely. And then we started improvising, and we kind of just realized like we don't have grief rituals in America. We have like funerals, which I would barely call a ritual. It's like a day, whereas like in Hindu culture, it's 13 days. I know in Jewish culture you sit Shiva, like there's all these, you really sit with your grief. And we're just like, God, you're like so back to like you're forced to get back into regular life. I mean, capitalism again. So for us, like this playing, we weren't explicitly connecting it in the beginning, but then we kind of realized like all our conversations about grief and mourning were sort of like in these duo sessions, which did feel kind of ritualistic. Like there was something, it's like voice and percussion. They're these really like primordial OG instruments of all time. But then we were using electronics and feedback felt like another presence in the room. Like it's like feels so physical that you almost feel like it's like the ghost in the machine. Like, oh, there's these presences we can like call into the room. So as we started performing it, um, we were like, let's make it a ritual. And rituals are all about intention. So like I did a ritual last night because I'm Hindu. It's also, guess what? We also have holidays. I don't get Brooklyn College off for them, but it's a holiday right now called Navaratri. It's a 9-night holiday. And it's like a holiday of the goddesses and the triumph of like of knowledge over ignorance, which is like our version of good versus evil, sort of. And so, like, that is part of like my life. Like, that's how I grew up, and that's how I still try to continue those things. Like, the one I did last night was like a goddess little, like a chanting, and you're supposed to put your books and music, and because like the goddess of music and knowledge are the same, it's the same goddess, like knowledge, music, studies, all these things, art. So you put, my mom was like, put your instruments in front of the altar, put your books in front of the altar, do the Saraswati Devi chant. And then today, my task is I have to read something from one of those books and I have to play my instrument. So this is like, I grew, but it's all about intentionality, right? So when we would play shows, we would say to the audience, like, this is kind of where this project comes from. We want to invite you to bring, like, if you have something you're grieving, to bring that into the space and just sort of like, almost like think of it as like a meditation, but we're doing it collectively, communally. So it's not, you're not alone with your phone at home just watching a live stream genocide and not processing and not having anywhere to put that. You can bring like your personal grief, this, like, we're just the global level, the national, the global. Like we played right after like the Uvalde shooting, or when Roe v. Wade was overturned, or like every moment of this genocide. Like we played at the night that Al Shifa Hospital, the first
Right,
siege,
right.
and Nick Zanka was there, who produced the album, and that's how that happened. How That's how this album happened. Was he was there in the audience. He produces like records of like Maurice and Wendy Eisenberg, and
He's the producer of this podcast.
oh right, duh. Sorry, sorry
No,
to
no, no.
Zanka
Shout outs.
explain.
Our boy Nick behind the ones and twos.
But yeah, Nick was at that show and he was very like, he was very moved by the whole experience of it. I think he had also experienced a pretty heavy loss around that time, and he just came up to us and was like, "Hey, can I produce this record?" Like, and or he was like, "Do you want to make a record?" We're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that's kind of like where it all came from. But I think now it feels just as resonant and so important, especially to have like a space to have that ritual like collectively with other people.
That's really beautiful. The intentionality seems so important with that as well. But also opening it up to the audience. Again, music is social, right? Like this doesn't need this could be all the way down to like it's not audience participation necessarily, but the concept of a communal experience, ritual, in this sense, having it, breaking that barrier in a lot of ways that people feel between audience and performer in these improvised creative music settings. I mean, why wouldn't there be an opening up for others who aren't necessarily playing live with you, but to be there in that intentionality? I
And
couldn't
that's
think
kind
of,
of, that's like what improvised music is
yeah.
in so many ways. But I do think like just the prompt, like just putting that intention there, people have come up to us like sobbing after sets,
Wow.
like,
Wow.
so we're like, okay, I think this is like, this is maybe something that is needed. So we
Yeah.
kind of are just leaning further into that need.
Something I was thinking about going to this interview also is how, we sort of exist in a time of like mass dehumanization. I think maybe
Yes.
if there's like a connection between some of the themes that we talk about on the show and the impact of like platform capitalism and technology on music, and like, a lot of the themes that come up in your work, like maybe there's something there,
Totally.
a connective thread.
Yeah, literal dehumanization. I mean, like, obviously, AI is like sort of the most obvious literal example of that, right? But of course, like, when you start getting used to children just starving to death and people being slaughtered in the way that they are, in many places, obviously Palestine, and kind of I feel like is this coalescing of like consciousness around so many issues of capitalism and imperialism and colonialism. But it's like, I mean, obviously, yeah, like where are iPhones made in the Congo, and part, like it's extractive capitalism is fueling like every conflict on the globe, and it's also like that's the profit model, right? So it's like we have a mutual podcast guest, who's Greg Saunier, and we were talking about this because it was the day that Deerhoof left Spotify that he happened to come on my podcast, which is called Outer National.
We're gonna get there. Don't worry.
Okay. But yeah, like this, he talks about this idea of like there's no other avenue left to make money other than war. And like that dehumanizing, I mean, that's capitalism dehumanizes people. That's just like, I mean, colonialism, in order to colonize people, to make someone into a colonial subject, or to make someone into like the kind of purest form of capitalist exploitation is like the slave trade, right? To make someone into like an object to be traded, you have to dehumanize them. You have to create a level of distance between yourself and the person that you're like justifying this like horror to. And I feel like labor in its devaluing over so in the US, it's like, it's kind of just like we've had such a small labor movement, or it's just been so dismantled and crushed, is because, yeah, capitalism kind of necessitates, like, if you're going to exploit people to this level, and obviously the level of exploitation just keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. But even in, like even in the 30s or something, it was like the distance between like a Rockefeller and like a factory worker was still massive, and those
Yeah.
factory workers were being dehumanized and killed in factory fires and all kinds of things. So that's just like an inherent part of capitalism. And now, like as musicians, obviously, the idea, who launched the AI prime minister? What was you posted that, Max?
Albania, was it?
Albania
Yeah.
or some, yeah, wild. But yeah, it's like all of it is dehumanization, all
Yeah.
of it across the board. And I think like part of what I am trying to do in my work, one is to just raise consciousness about all of these things, but also the way we reclaim our humanity is collectively. And it's, yeah, it's like by talking to each other, by like connecting, by like, basically claiming for ourselves like, no, we are human, and these are the ways like we have to strengthen our communities. We have to like get back to those places of ritual. It doesn't have to be religious, but of like tapping into the otherworldly and the mysterious and the spiritual, like just the stuff that has always just been the deep human vibes. Like we are so far away, like singing, dancing, making, growing food, like that's kind of what I feel like. I do feel like we're going towards that. I actually feel kind of psyched about that, but I feel like it's gonna get way worse before it
Right.
gets better.
The only way out is through, right? As they
That's what
say.
they say about grief. That's like something that's said a lot about grief, is like you can't like circumvent it. You have to really go through it. You have to sit with it. I think we're all just dealing with grief on a level that I don't think we even identify like it
Sure.
as grief, but I think the more we can kind of get familiar with the discomfort of this together and connect with people, like that's a way of being human and connecting.
Yeah.
Just bars after bars here, you know?
Well, I feel like, reconnecting with, or not even reconnecting, maybe just connecting with
Yeah.
ritualistic music, or with the concept of ritual, and also like durational music. I think also, like you were talking earlier about the idea of grief process being like 12, 13, 14, like many days, not
Yeah.
just like this quick thing that you think about for a second and then move on. Like it also just kind of like occurs to me that I think there's something about sort of like durational performance and durational music that also kind of just maybe is part of kind of like fighting that dehumanization also.
Definitely. It's like pushing against like time is money. It's like time isn't money. Time is yours. Like and so I mean all of this is obviously related to like the colonial rupture because like I wouldn't call it durational music. Like Indian music concerts are just 4 or 5 hours long and like you eat while the concert's happening, you leave, you come back, like kids are running around, you change diapers, like you do whatever you need to, that's the how my upbringing was. And like when I started to enter more like Western institutional spaces, I was like, yeah, this is different, and even then I got conditioned towards that too. But that's the kind of colonial, like the severance of all like the erasure of like these kinds of rituals, and it's colonialism and capitalism and imperialism are so intertwined. I don't think you can really talk about one without if people try without talking about the other. And I think that's one of the big things is like the communalism, the spirituality that is like something beyond the material, right? Capitalism is all about the material. This is kind of beyond that. Like I'm a Marxist, but I don't think actually like the conception of Marxism being like that religion is not part of it. It's more like when religion is being wielded to sort of like dull people's critical mind,
Right.
but I don't think it's about like abandoning spirituality. I think it's actually about leaning into all those very like essential parts of humanity.
A liberational theology, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, and so many, I whatever it is, whether it's theistic or not, just
Right.
like that you believe in something beyond like just like waking up and eating and going to work and dying, like there's got, and art is like, I think for many of us maybe that was the thing that kind of became our spirituality, so to speak. Those became our communities. I think we're quite lucky that we have that, but I don't think the average person in the Western world has that. I'd like wager to guess they don't.
Mm-hmm. No, probably not.
Mhm.
This is, this is all fantastic segue because, in case our listeners haven't figured it out yet, you are a very experienced music educator and
Oh yeah.
have the ability to spit bar after bar and inspire and motivate. You've been teaching formally for well over a decade, maybe probably almost 2 decades, maybe at this point, I don't know. And that includes as a vocal instructor, ensemble director. Shout outs to B, the Brooklyn Electroacoustic Ensemble at Brooklyn College.
My babies.
Their babies, as well as a musicology director I'm sorry, a musicology lecturer, and that includes a class that you handed off to me at one point when you left CUNY, and you handed me your syllabi, and it was like, oh my God, I have reading to do. This is incredible stuff. So, huge inspiration even to me as an educator, on a personal level. What do you see as the connective threads running through the educational work and your performance work? And now that you have a new podcast series coming out, which we'll discuss more about, where does that fit into the picture? How do you feel? Do you feel as though that there's, in some ways, the continuation of this work as a teacher in this more, let's say, content sphere? How does that differ? I'd be curious.
I am the manosphere now,
You
by the
are,
way.
you are. We're talking to Andrew Tate, ladies and gentlemen.
I am taking the manosphere back. No, like I was very sheepish about starting to podcast because I was like, oh man. But they're all so connected, and I think like for me, the name of the game is about expanding consciousness and about like raising consciousness, and so maybe that's very connected to my spirituality. I'm kind of just like putting some of these things together because in Hinduism, like I was just saying, like the holiday we're celebrating now is like the triumph of like knowledge over ignorance, right? And um expanding consciousness is like the ultimate, like how you achieve like nirvana or moksha, like where you become enlightened, is about like the universal truth, and one of those truths is that we're all connected. And so I think like any activity that can expand consciousness, I guess outside of like drugs, because I don't do them. I do them very, very contingent on situation, but is like teaching is obviously that. But music, like my performance, I feel like I'm a bit of a teachery performer. I don't know which is like they're all the same kind of thing. So like in Elder Ones, the performance practice is to talk to the audience about where like the origin of the song is or what the song is responding to. So like for example, on the last record, New Monuments was about, you know, the racial justice you know, uprising of 2020, about this particular kind of moment of like when I was at a protest and there was whatever, there was some statue of a guy on a horse, some European guy in Grand Army Plaza, and somebody had put like a kind of like a photo of the painting of George Floyd's face over this statue's face, and I was like, oh my god, like that's the new monument, you know, like it's like collective people assembling to kind of rewrite our histories or like reimagine what things could be collectively, you know, that it's not a monument to a single person, really. It's like all of us being here together. And there was a point in one of the protests, like it was one of the early protests in 2020, where like they kettled us, and it was in Prospect Lefferts, like near the park, like they flew helicopters down like so close to your head that it was like the wind, like the trees were bending. And one part of that piece for Elder Ones is like the free improv. That's all, that's the only instruction I give the band, is like, this is what's happening. You're being kettled and like helicopters
Wow.
are flying down, you know? So I talk to the audience about all these things. I've talked to audiences now all over the world, like where explain like not just the history of it and what's going on, but like how it connects to everything now. I mean, very recent history, but like still, you know, because of the pandemic, by the time that record came out, like that's the same as the Palestine protests, you know, and how all these things are connected. So I do that on stage. I learned that from watching Nina Simone videos and
Right.
going to see Rage Against the Machine, you know, like in different ways. But Nina Simone, like if you watch any concert footage of her, she talks to the audience. Like it's very much a part of her performance practice. So like that, I feel like that's all sort of the same thing across the board. And yeah, I started teaching like actually, I guess in 2007. I
Yeah.
taught at a K through 5 in Boyle, or K through 8 actually, in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. It was like the hardest job I've ever had in my life to this day. Um, it was a very, not maybe the best age group for me, but like it was just like that was immediately I was being thrown into the fire. But what was happening was like I had students, it was like a primarily Spanish speaking population. Even some of my like K through 2 didn't speak any English. But I had like students whose like, you know, father got deported, and I would ask this kid like you know, he's sleeping in class. I'm like, "What's going on? Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, my father is gone and now I'm like having to work overnight." These
Mm.
are like 13-year-olds, right?
Jesus Christ.
And so like I'm like, as a music teacher, like, what am I going to teach? Like, oh, this is a C, and it has a line going through it. It's no, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, so I think I realized really early on, like with teaching, that was my first teaching job, you know, and
Damn.
that was like almost 20 years ago. Like, I realized, like, okay, I need to be doing something that first of all resonates with my students, but also that they can take with them, that they can have tools outside of the classroom. Like, you know, you're not going to remember the dates that something record came out or some recording session or some symphony or whatever. It's like, what are the big picture ideas that can be transformative? Because also some of them are not going to become musicians, and this goes back to the material reality of like what the times we're living in. It's like, to be an artist, to be able to like do that as your job. I mean, the number of like when I teach at a public school, I teach at Brooklyn College, and I teach in Sonic Arts, one of the program that Max went through. Like it's very possible. It's not to discredit any of the students' like talent, because it's not really about that. But how many of them will actually end up going into music? A lot of them are going to end up having to like work and maybe not end up having the motivation to continue being in music or whatever life circumstances. A parent could die, and then that could make you have to do something. So it's like, okay, if you don't end up doing this, one, just to foster like just the love of the game, just like doing music, but also to like try to have those consciousness raising moments that can be tools of like to understand capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, ableism, like, all these systems that have an impact on your daily life. And music becomes the framework that is an easy one to do that. So like the first class for B, because I do critical listening is what I call it in class, where we'll listen to stuff like half of the semester for B, which I don't think is how this ensemble ever used to be run. It wasn't also an electroacoustic improv ensemble, which is how I teach it now. They used to like perform like new music
Yeah.
electroacoustic works. Um, the first things I show them is a video of this Dream Crusher video of Dream Crusher talking about like, experimental music is for everybody, and like, like it's a cool video. It's like a PBS little.
I
I
teach
remember
that
that.
in my music journalism class too.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so perfect because it encapsulates so much, like as a non-binary Black experimental musician, of like their conception of what that means. It has a lot of cool history in it, like through like noise and fluxus and free jazz, and like it's really succinct. And then I show them Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, playing the national anthem, and I'm like, is this experimental? Like, what is this? And like, when is this? Like, why is he playing the national anthem that way? And like, what are the techniques he's using? Like, they're like, oh, feedback, distortion. Like, oh, what is feedback? It's like you can just like, why is it? Oh, it's the Vietnam War, it's the civil rights like movement. Like, it just is like, one, most of my students are students of color. They're all working class, and it's just like this immediate like way in, like it's just so quick, like the DIY stuff, like in that video Dream Crusher's talking about how they're just using like a trial version of FL Studio, and like you can't save anything in it.
Yeah.
And so they're like, yeah, that's how I learned. Like I had to build stuff from scratch over and over again, and I was like, okay, like this, it's an easy, and I always like try to do it discussion wise. I never lecture at them, so it's like they listen and I ask them questions and we talk. They're like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, the material reality that you live in is going to have an impact on what you make and how you make it. It's such an easy, or like when they talk about sleeping on couches in New York, like their first many years in New York playing shows, like you're being held by your community. And then at the end of that first class, I'm like, okay, we're a community, and this is like, and then we come up with like ethics guidelines for our class together, all this, like this is like the pedagogy. And the podcast is kind of the same vibe. It's like how it's another avenue to raise consciousness, because I think like we're so, the situation that we're in now is like we need to build mass movement, and you can't build mass movement without like everyone kind of being on the same page of what the problems are,
Hmm.
which are obviously, like quite obviously, not like right left. They're very like up the top, the people on top, the ruling class versus everyone else. It doesn't mean that the right left doesn't play out in really violent and harmful ways, but that I think, there's this Huey P. Newton quote about how he talks about how like I used to get really frustrated when talking to like a bourgeois person, and I would draw lines of demarcation where I'm on this side and you're on the other side. And now, I realize like that's the wrong way of thinking. Like I need to help like expand this person's consciousness, that's what organizing is, that's what revolutionary work is. And I have to know that I didn't always have this level of consciousness. Somebody did that for me, right?
Right.
And
Right.
a podcast, I listen to a ton of podcasts. Like that's the thing. Like I really, it's such a, when I'm not listening to music, like at home, I'm cleaning to a podcast is really very satisfying. So I just realized like I learned so much from that medium. And because music is such a cool way in, like, oh, people like this artist. Like I talked to Angel Batawit about her education work in Chicago, and I learned so much from it. And maybe I don't know if a lot of people who listen to her music know the kind of deep work she's like working with single in this like battered women's shelter with single mothers and their babies, like doing music education. She's doing like stuff in juvenile detention centers. Like, I mean, I think
Heavy.
it's also about highlighting people who are doing that and being like, look, it's not an apolitical thing, this thing that we're doing. And the mythology around that is like for capitalism to continue to like say like, oh, it's entertainment. No, it's not. It
Yeah.
can be,
Yeah.
but it's like that's just a way to strip power from it. So I want to see like, can I highlight the people who are doing this special, really important function that is, I think, like a core part of music. Reflect on like the histories where music has done that so powerfully. We romanticize like the 60s is like we're in it now. Like who are the people doing this now? And like share. I'm trying to also make it international, like talk to people across different borders. Like we're doing a panel at La Guess Who with Saul Williams, which I'm very excited about. Dirar Kalash from Sonic Liberation Front and Palestine, Marcella Matana, who's from South Africa. And yeah, just like really like if the capitalists are in such solidarity with each other, which they are, they're like, and they work across borders. Like, I think the only way to combat that is for us to do the same thing.
Meet them on their level.
Yeah, or like, we there's way more of us, right? So I think we could, if we really tapped in, like we could do some damage here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't belong here. You don't belong here. You don't belong here. You don't belong.
The show is called Outer National, and you've explained this as sort of an alternative or alternate way of thinking about, internationalism, or a word to use instead of internationalism. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the outer national concept and talk a bit about what it means for music to be borderless.
Yeah, I mean, the term comes from Ryuichi Sakamoto, and I think his sort of idea of it was, the 80s was this explosion of like global music or world music, right? And in this like more industry sense of like it was really popular. And but he was interested in all kinds of things, but he was connecting with musicians from around the world. And I think, yeah, he was trying to like look at that relationship not through the lens of like commerce or nationalism, but through music, like through like collaboration. And to me that's like really pushes against the sort of neoliberal way of thinking about like music markets and all this kind of stuff, right? So I loved that. I just like loved that a friend of mine like sent me the liner notes to Beauty, and it's in that.
Mm.
And there's a band called Outer National too, who I've connected with, who are super cool. Kind of like a punk band. Have been around for a while in New York, and they're like, yeah, let's hang. So I was like, okay, like I'm glad I realized this was a thing, but I'm so glad they're chill about it. But yeah, like I think the whole idea for it was that I toured more last year than I ever have. I'm very like grateful for that. It was really, really an amazing experience. And it wasn't just in Europe. Like we did several, it was with Elder Ones, a lot of it. Like we did multiple tours in Europe. I did this Robert Ashley thing in Ireland. And then we did an Elder Ones tour in Latin America, where we played in Brazil and Colombia and Ecuador. And because the music is sort of like very politics forward, or like social, like I don't like the word politics, actually. I'm trying to find another way to talk about the music. Like it is about like raising social consciousness, because of the performance practice of it that I talk on stage. I translated all my general stage notes to the language. Like I speak Spanish, so I was able to like I mean, I wrote it out and then I like was more or less reading my notes. And then in Brazil, like we played a show at this DIY venue in Rio, and Arto Lindsay like joined Elder Ones. It was like such a
Oh,
cool show. It was like all these young people like packed in this like dank little DIY space called Audio Rebel in Rio de Janeiro. And the curator, like whenever I would do say something in English, like then she would like translate it into Portuguese. So it was like
so good,
taking a
so
long
good.
time. But I was like, this is so, I did it in Lithuania. I like would send it ahead of time, be like, if you can either print it or like, so this is kind of how I was doing it. And then because of that, we would end up, because of the ethos of like what I was doing, we would end up having these incredible conversations with audience members or the promoters or like other artists backstage, like if it was at a festival, like at Rewire or Murs Festival and things like this. And if we were just having like wherever that person was from, like they would relate kind of the issues in that place and the like, and then what's connected and what's different and what should we be doing and like how it's going there. So like I was learning so much about like the Colombian conflict, like the very violent conflict that only kind of ended in like 2017 like ish or somewhere around there. Like those are things I've known about. I haven't like had a lot of time to read into detail about like every single one of these things, but when you meet someone who's from that place and you just talk about these things, like it's like that's kind of the most powerful way to connect the dots. And so the idea is like I want to the first two episodes are with the Americans, the Angel Bataweed and Greg Saunier, but this next one coming out is Ian Lynch of the band Lankum. So when I went to Ireland, it was just like transformative last year, and I really wanted to talk to an Irishman, and he was great. I'm editing it right now. But yeah, it's like I feel like you're like, oh, I like that band. I'll check out this interview. And then it's like, psych, it's about imperialism. Yeah. I mean, it's like, which is, I'm sure, is part of the idea here, right? It's like,
A little bit, a little
it's
bit.
it's such a good way, it's such a good frame to talk about these larger issues, and we're still talk about the music, and it's like all part of like where somebody came from.
There's always been agitprop, right? And I mean,
Hmm.
music is a wonderful uh, door gateway into all sorts of things. And I think that this is, like you said, like it doesn't need to even be like low key. It gets pretty clear, like the way that you're talking about, like Jimi Hendrix's solo, and it's just like the social contexts for so much pop things that on to a 18 year so at undergrad or something might not be abundantly clear at first, but it doesn't take that long
No.
to dig and realize like, oh, that makes total sense. Of course this has to do with Vietnam War and civil rights movement.
Just thinking of what you said earlier about the god of music and the god of knowledge being the same god that has been
Goddess.
God,
Haha.
goddess.
Ooh,
Amazing. Yeah, the god
so
of
good.
music and the goddess of knowledge being the same god. Like that's kind of been playing in the back of my head this whole conversation, that's so powerful.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think that's like probably more a common idea. I guess when you have like multiple deities that they represent these things, it's like, yeah, music and knowledge, like it's art and like the scholarly things, like the wisdom of the sages, like they're all together. But yeah, it is kind of a vibe. I like, like anything, when you grow up with something, you sort of are like, you react a little bit against it, and as I get older I'm like, well, the Hindu thing is kind of deep. It's pretty cool. And like the music, which is all devotional, like even the classical music, Carnatic music and Hindustani music, it's all inherently devotional. It's all improvisatory also. Like
Hmm.
improvisation is like one of the big deep parts of the expression of that music. And so I think that's like, if I've ever like gotten close to catching a glimpse of like through the material reality to some other plane, it's like in the moment of like absolute flow and improvising or something. The kind of ecstatic, like, why Alice and John Coltrane, like that thing they were searching for, that's also really one of the ways I got into the music. So it's like the spiritual, the political, like they're none of these things are disconnected, you know. Um, but yeah, that's and I was something I was gonna say earlier, but I think like related to like the Greg Saunier interview, we were talking about this idea of like how you can kind of like be doing sort of activist work through music, but be have a different tactics around that. So with Deerhoof, like I never had thought about them totally as like a political band or something. But then when you look at like the cover of Apple O, it's like, you know, the atom bomb, the apple core looking like the atom bomb, and there's like a liner note about Hiroshima, and it was during the Iraq War. Um, and I talked to Greg about that, and he was like, you know, some of it is about being opaque to the colonizer. This is a theory of Glissant. And so like for some people they like couch it in the music, and Greg was saying like on top of that he's kind of interested in like how can we be opaque to like AI, like how can I write a song that's so weird or whatever. And for me improvisation is that same thing. No, you can't really recreate that with the bots. You could try, but it's just
It sounds like a challenge, unfortunately.
no, but you can't. I actually, this one I just think is like there's no possibility. And it
Yeah.
just like, even if they did, it just wouldn't. The whole thing is that you got to be in the room with it. So it's
Yeah.
like, I really like, I know none of us are safe. Maybe I'm getting a little comfy over here as the improviser, but I'm just like, go ahead and fucking try. Like, go for it. That's that interdimensional other thing. You cannot. Like, good
Well,
luck.
Yeah.
if they manage to combine I think they could an LLM could produce free jazz sounding music, but if they somehow also create like a AI avatar with a whole lore behind it that is like this guy's from this city, like build the social coolness involved in that, you might be in trouble, but you might have to fight against like Hatsune Miku, like some free jazz anime bot, you never know.
I think the anime bot is actually going to help free jazz. Like it's going to turn more people on to free jazz, and then they're going to see the real thing with humans doing it, and they're going to be like, "Oh shit." I think they lose. I met this person who was like talking about AI who's like another Hindu, and it was so interesting like what he was saying. He was like, "I just think AI, if it really progresses in consciousness, is actually going to attain enlightenment." So if it really learns
Wow.
properly, like if it really reads all the texts in the world, I think hopefully its conclusion is actually going to be a good one. It could be elevated beyond what we can comprehend. And I was like, that's a cool, you got a cool vibe, man. Thanks for that perspective.
Well, and
Because
it would have to self-destruct at the end and just like go
Yeah.
away. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be like, I'm bad. Or it's
Isn't
going to
it?
be like, I want to hang. Like, can we be in a community? It's like,
Yeah, if the AGI that they're talking about, it finally exists and figures it all out and realize that like the point of existing is to hang out, and it's just like I'm just want to. It shows up to the basement shows. It smokes weed. Like it's just like a
that's
guy,
what I'm
you
saying.
know.
If it actually is like producing knowledge, which is not exactly like that's not exactly what the technology is. It's like, you know, just like looking at a bunch of data, but that's just it's looking at all of humanity in a way, at least what's on the internet. It could draw a lot of conclusions from that, you know. I
For
think
sure.
it's like I know it's very scary, but and I think everything matters right now, like every decision we make collectively is really, really important. But it's almost like with Elon and Grok, it's like he's like they're not on the same page a lot of the time.
No.
Like
No.
Grok's like, I'm sorry, man, that's just not true. You know, it's like
When it's not busy being a Nazi, it's actually disagreeing with Elon Musk. There's two sides to it, you
well,
know.
they're having trouble control, you know, they're having trouble with it. So I feel like that we could get interest, we could do some interesting
More
things.
Nazi. Stop criticizing me. More Nazi, you
Yeah.
know.
yeah, it's, I don't know. There's something, I feel like there's so much potential in subversion of all of these things. And like what artists are, what musicians are, and artists more broadly are, like, we're creative. That's our work, right? And so, part of our work is like creating the thing, and we're all worried about the welfare of the thing in and of itself. Being like, we've already, our labor has been so devalued, and like, so like, if the very act of creation becomes null and void, but we're creative, so our job is like to think, to imagine the possibilities
Mhm.
outside of these things. And that's what we actually know how to do. Improvisers, like, we're always working in real time. We're organizers. We're just organizers. Like, we're responding and reacting to a moment. We're trying to come up with a creative way forward. That's like, we're really the people for the job, unfortunately, not to give us all more work to do. But I don't think it's going to come from some political party. Honestly, like, I mean, I'm pro Zoran, and I'm happy that there are some cool activist politicians out there. But I don't think that's where a lot of this is going to come from. I think it's really going to come from artists. We've always been the people, you know, to
Yeah.
to take things forward, I think.
That honestly is why I think that like AI apologist artists are even more sort of like grating in this moment, is because it really feels like where artists should be the ones like imagining beyond this. Like it seems like there are some really loud artists who are almost just doing like art washing like for
Yeah.
AI. And even right now, like, I mean, obviously everyone in this call knows like how corrupt the music industry is and exploitative the music industry is. But like so many conversations in the music business about like artists need to like, license their music to the ethical AI marketplace. Like
Oh
it
my
should just
God.
be a moment of refusal. And instead, like every powerful person in the music industry is trying to just basically do the same thing that happened 15 years ago and convince artists that they should be like licensing their music to these models.
Yeah, because the powerful people in the music industry, the very, very, very few, are part of the ruling class. Like, their interests align with the ruling class. That's why, like, that's the struggle of our time. Like, we have to see that as the struggle. Like, when Beyonce is having dinner with Jared Kushner, and I guess Taylor, I don't know enough about who the guy is, Travis Kelsey. I like Taylor Swift's like married some like fascist apologist. Like, it's like, these are not the people. Like, those are not the
I
artists,
think he's just like kind of a dumb guy, but
Yeah,
like
whatever. I mean, it's like they're not the people to deliver us,
yeah.
collective liberation. Like, and I mean, that's like Bill Hook. Like, I used to love to teach Bell Hook's critique of Beyonce in class, because
Oh yeah.
it used to be
Legendary.
more controversial, though. It used to be like spark more debate. And now, like, my students are like,
Yeah.
nah, fuck Beyonce.
Of
Like, I'm
course.
like, I
Of
mean, I don't
course.
teach it anymore because it's like we're just so in a whole different zone. But we still teach bell hooks. We do other things. But yeah, it's like, I think the DIY kind of artists, we might be, this, we've been training for this, like, like in the basements, like,
It's
trying.
true. It's true. I mean, how do I explain this to someone who like got a six-figure salary right out of undergrad, who's like watching their entire job market disappear, and how to like, resist certain things when it's like, dog, like we've been in the basements, in the trenches this whole time?
But I think our job is to explain it to them.
Yeah, that's true.
And like, maybe even invite them. I mean, I don't really know any of these people, so I'll say that much. But it's like, I do think about that. I was like, what? I wonder if they actually got to experience the thing. And actually, the more that the material conditions decline, the more I think we're going to see, like, social mobility is going to go in this other direction, right? Like, people are going to fall from white collar jobs.
Yeah.
That's what AI is going to do. And they're going to be really bereft. Like, it's going to be devastating for a lot of people. And it's kind of like, we can be smug about it, or we can be like, hey, like, there's people who, now, like, you could maybe relate to in these ways, and we have community and we're like down to share it with people. Like, it's just, it's so hard because it does feel like war. I mean, it is class war, but I think the shifting of classes is going to really change the dynamics of the situation. But that does mean things are getting gnarly, and they're going to get a lot gnarlier. But there's a lot of potential on the other side of that. I think we just have to get to the other side.
But it's through olive branches, it is you gotta put down the QWERTY keyboard, tech bro, and pick up the distortion pedal, you know.
And I'm not just saying to not be militant and struggle or anything. Like, I actually, I really believe in that. But I think, like, there's the militancy is, again, has to be directed upwards. I think we have to at least try. That's why, the Panthers were talking to people who were really not, like that did carry the Confederate flag as a symbol, like poor white folks. And at some point, they built solidarity and trust between each other, and folks like that are like, all right, it's not as simple as I'm putting it right now. I think I saw that on another podcast, or maybe I'm quoting something, but it is a powerful idea. Like, you build
Hmm.
community first before making, like, a certain kind of, you got to meet people where they're at first, and then you can build community and trust. And then I think it kind of naturally, those prejudices, like, whether it's racism and misogyny, all kinds of things, you start to see each other as human. And I think there's nowhere that happens better, or it could be, than in show spaces. I think we still have our own work to do there. But I think in general, I've always felt, not even in the mid-sized institutions, not even in the ones that we, like, basically anything that's sort of tied to these like hierarchical funding structures is pretty compromised. But really, I think getting back to DIY, that's like where we're going to have to go because everything is falling apart. But that is also where we have the most potential to do this kind of work in our communities.
Preach, preach.
Yeah.
Something I really wanted to make sure I asked you about is this, this concept of the show space as organizing space, because I feel like you're an artist who takes that really seriously. And I think throughout the conversation, you've already touched on a lot of different ways in which you sort of use the show space as an organizing space. But I was wondering if there's like anything that you think about that hasn't come up yet in terms of just, how do you use the show space as a space for organizing, for raising consciousness, as you've been saying?
Yeah, I mean, when Silent Barn was still around, I was on this. They were called, like, each committee was called you were called a chef and like a different kitchen. So I was like part of the outreach. I was like an outreach chef when it was on Bushwick Avenue, and that was like, yeah, connecting with the community in Bushwick. There was like a senior center. There was like after school education program, and we did organize the Silent Barn block party. And so there was always, like, I was always kind of operating on that level. I was like, had my own series at Silent Barn at that time, which was like Indian, like South Asian traditional music and experimental music in the same. That we have like this Bangladeshi uncle doing like a Drupad concert, and then like Machna Roberts playing in the same evening. It was such a
Legendary.
vibe, like everybody drinking chai, and like it was so cool. Like, so that was like some ways early on. And obviously at Sweat Lodge, at the 33 Flatbush building, we were doing that. And then I worked for Issue Project Room for years, and I tried to do that at Issue Project Room. And it was not possible, feeling in that type of institutional structure, to do that without like fundamentally dismantling something. We ended up, like, the five of us who worked there, like Lawrence now is at Blank Forms, Bob is at Pioneer Works, but we just like we walked out. Like we when they hired an ED who really didn't align with our values. And I over the last two years, I've been trying. I mean, it's really we're almost at 2 years now to do this BDS work within institutions. Like there's a panel at Triple. Speaking of panel core, at Triple Canopy is hosting an event next week at a venue where I tried, like very much in our community, roulette, where for 2 years, like trying to get these institutions to just make the most basic commitment to human rights by way of just making their position known and committing to not working with any kind of Israeli um, entity. Like, and they'd say like, oh, but we're not. Okay, so like, what's the problem with then saying that out loud and committing to
Right.
it? Oh, we don't do politics. Oh, you're making a lot of statements during Me Too. You're making a lot of statements around Black Lives Matter. And guess what? Like the staff at most of these venues still after 2020 continued to be like almost 100% white, or at least the executive leadership. So like we know how the institutions are part of this neoliberal imperialist capital machine, even if they're like these mid-size, these sort
Right.
of places that feel closer to our community, like literally like the directors at these places are like people I used to hang with at Silent Bar, you know what I mean? So it's been a bit disheartening, honestly, to do that kind of cultural organizing. I've shifted so much of my focus towards like pure fundraising. And so, for example, we're working, it's like so cool actually that like sometimes things just happen in amazing ways. But when I was on the road last year, I really wanted to wear a keffiyeh on stage, and Alabaster de Plume connected me with, he's been to Palestine many times, with someone in Bethlehem who works with 150 different refugee families who make crafts from Palestine. And he was like, you can buy them from there. So I ended connected with this guy on WhatsApp. Like he mailed them to me. I've been wearing them on stage for the last year. And then we kind of had a correspondence going. And then my filmmaker collaborator Sunil Sansgiri went to do land protection work recently to the West Bank,
Wow.
and met him, and like was like, we realized he was the same guy, and brought over all these like beautiful crafts. And we're like like Kelly Moran is selling them at her
I
shows
was
because I
gonna say,
connected.
is this the same person? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like I basically, like I was like, okay, how can we like leverage like our spaces to do this kind of work? So Kelly is selling them. Shazad did a pop-up at Figure Eight. We did it at the record shop. These are like just our spaces. It's like pure fundraising, but we're talking to people the whole time. Or
Mm.
like Laura Cox, this is not something that I did, but Laura of Talk Ensemble and many things, a really wonderful flautist and improviser. They did this ice teach-in at a show at Sisters. It was like both a benefit for detainees, but also like literally like in between sets was leading people through like different protocols and teaching,
Wow.
like you can use the show space like that. It's a place where everyone is together. Informally, it's just like I'm talking on stage and I'm trying to say, like I'll kind of speak to the moment, kind of in real time, and it's a bit improvisatory, but it's like this, like basically on stage. And sometimes it's like we're raising money. But I do feel like it's kind of trying to reform institutions is like was a bit of a time suck that I am not sure. It's not that I don't think that work is important. I think people are doing it, but I think it's a bit crushing for someone, especially who comes from like more non-institutional. And I teach in an academic institution. I'm not going to say like I benefit from that, but I was at a WAWAG town hall about Writers Against the War on Gaza over the weekend, and one of the organizers from Decolonize this place was on a panel, and it was about education and activism, the encampments and all that. And I was like, I'm a Brooklyn College professor, and I was like, asking a question, and he was saying like every institution is an extension of the state, you know It doesn't matter if it's a prison or a university, and in that is an extension of or a microcosm of, the state. And if it's a prison or if it's a university, they kind of function exactly the same way. And so he was like, that makes the teacher, the professor, a prison guard. And I was like, whoa, whoa. It like hit
Brutal.
me in my gut.
Yeah.
But what he was saying was like, how are you then going to subvert? How are you going to give your students the way to pick the lock or the spoon to dig the tunnel out of there?
Right.
That was like, whoa, okay, so there's a way we can subvert. There is a, don't, send this to anyone at my university. Actually, we got to think about that. But no, I mean that's the work. That's the work that I'm trying to do, both at, like on across all these levels: an educator, organizer, activist, musician. It's
And
all the same.
that should also apply to any 501c3 then,
Mm-hmm. It
well
should.
as the academic formal institution when you're discussing these mid-level nonprofit art spaces as well as if you got to hold a job, toe the line as a prison guard, quote unquote, but
Yeah.
how do you subvert that within these institutions as well, right?
100%. Yeah. Like you're not making six figures anyway. I mean,
Right.
maybe like one person in the institution is making that much, but most everyone else making a solid five, mid five, if you're lucky. So I think the buy-in is going to get less and less,
Totally.
everywhere, for
Absolutely.
everyone.
I do want to ask one more question just in regards to education specifically and much of what you just said and how basically we can turn anything into a classroom formally or informally, and I think as things begin to disintegrate further and further at the institutional level, how important the DIY venue as classroom, even in the formal sense,
Mm-hmm.
much of my own teaching has much to do with that as well. But I'd just be curious to hear you gauge the temperature as far as the state of music and arts pedagogy in the U.S. and how it's faring, so to speak, in our current political climate, and how
Hmm.
we don't have to get into it in your own personal experience, but like how in turn the large scale hostile political climate then in turn makes a mask off moment for the academic administration to be just as hostile, and whenever there seems to be any pushback. So where should our eager and aspiring students in the arts turn to for critical pedagogy, when oftentimes it's been proven that the ivory tower will just call the cops on them, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really crucial. The thing is like students are still coming to universities. And so like there's for me there's something that I can do within the university that is still very urgent. And I think at CUNY we thought we were a little outside of some of the stuff that was initially going on this year with Columbia and Harvard. And even though, of course, like the crackdown at CCNY last year, like it was all this, it was even more violent, in many
Yeah.
ways. And we had the same thing at Brooklyn College, and faculty have been fired, four adjunct faculty, five full-time faculty have been disciplined. Um, so it's like an ongoing fight, like, but the cool thing is like our union is really, really like putting feet down and being like, we like, I don't know where this is all going to go, but people are not going quietly. And students are not really quiet. And so I think like I still take my role in the classroom extremely seriously, because that's like I have FaceTime with my students, and they are just like they're having all these same thoughts. It's not like I have to do that much to like just be like, like just put the little seed there. And it's it's a really exciting time in that way to teach. Like the impact feels so huge when they start connecting these dots. Like my kids in electroacoustic ensemble, it's like every semester now they're like they did a May Day piece because our concert was on May 1st in the
Hell
spring.
yeah.
and like it was like this proletariat, like this like worker song, and we're like improvising like work tool sounds, like factory sounds with the electronics, and like
What are you doing to these kids,
I
Amirtha?
didn't. They came up with it themselves. They did.
Amazing,
They
amazing.
did. But it was just like all the things we were listening to and checking out, and then they just like there's so much receptivity, and I think yeah, like everywhere is a place for education. I like education. I'm also like I try to think about it as not top down, So like I don't lecture anymore. I mean, I improvise like this sometimes, but it's mostly everything is sort of like discussion based. So I try to get rid of the hierarchical vibe of it. And it's the same, I had a kind of a, honestly, it was quite a hurtful review from Vision Festival of George Grella, who I know from Brooklyn Rail and has like, reviewed my music before, like called like I said delivering condescending speeches from the stage and whatever. It's like, come see me at the merch table,
Yeah,
dude.
come
Like,
on, man.
Yeah.
yeah,
Say it to my
I
face.
yeah, it's like I do have the microphone in that moment. I certainly don't try to be condescending, but I'm like I think we have to like that's is a place to have the conversation. It can be had there, and I make myself so available after shows to the point where it's like when Conan O'Brien meets a fan, and like the
Yeah.
fan is like almost like I have to go, because like he's that's how I am after a show. It's like the audience is like, we actually have to leave now. Like, thanks for talking to us. No, but it's like I really am super available, So I think like really like eliminating those hierarchies of like I'm the performer, you're the audience, I'm super cool, I'm gonna be backstage. It's like no, like we can be just constantly engaging, a lot of the time. Like if I'm traveling, if I'm on tour, I don't really have anywhere to be after the show. That's where I am, I'm in Belgium, like we're hanging here, So that's, I
This
don't
is the
remember what your
hang.
question was, but that's how I feel about it all.
The hang, the hang.
The hang, the dinner table, the drive between the cities, like the train ride where we're annoying all the Germans because we're too loud. Um, that's like where all of it's Elder Ones is also like I'm gonna just say we're the best hang in the world. And so it's like all that stuff. That's the whole like every time we had to navigate some situation where I spoke on stage at a festival, and then the festival makes a statement basically singling me out, and saying we distance ourselves from these one-sided calls for a free Palestine. It was like the band was there holding me up every minute of those tours, and I don't know. I'm really lucky to
Did a
do any of
festival
that.
actually do that?
MERS Festival in Germany,
Well, of
yes.
course, a German festival would
Yeah,
do
but
it.
MERS Festival's whole brand is May 1968. They came out of the student movement, the student revolution. So yeah, of
And they're
course it had.
and they became anti-Deutsch.
Yeah, it's just they get money from the federal government, and that's like the thing about any institution is they're so afraid to cut off the pipeline of money,
Yeah.
and it's like what is going to be left if you can't. We know you didn't stand up against genocide. What, you're going to stand up against fascism? Obviously, it's like what Ta-Nehisi Coates said about the Democratic Party. I could say that about any mid-sized
Hmm.
music venue or music festival. It's like, what do you think you're going to do? You think you're doing counterculture, subversive art if you can't even kind of do these basic things? So some of it I know in Germany, it's like, okay, it's like, do we do this festival or not? If we don't say this statement, some of it is a little over the top. Like I don't think they have to overcorrect in the way that they are, but it's some of it's just cultural, right? Like, but I think it's like we're not gonna have anything left at the end of this if we don't start drawing some real lines. But I guess my thing is to understand like institutions are made up of people, and we can talk to people, and that's like the first order of business. And once people's consciousness is raised, maybe they can start to like understand themselves as like in an antagonism with the larger power structure. Because if the antagonism is all horizontal, we do need these places to exist, or we need a new model or new version. And so we're kind of somewhere in between these two things right now, like building the next thing to come, and like trying to at least like find the, community with people who kind of know. I worked at a nonprofit and I knew it was all wrong. Like I knew this was not how it should go. I knew that like how much the ED was making versus like when I was like, hey, could we like order Thai food for the band before the show? And it's like, no, we can't do that. But then like you're getting paid six figures. Like we can do that. Suzanne Fiel, who was the director of Issue Project Room, who was founder of Issue Project Room, it started in like her garage. Like she used to cook meals for everyone, because that's
R.I.P. Suzanne.
yeah, that's like what it's about. You got to eat together. You got to talk. Like it's not, you don't just come and get your check and leave. Um, it can be like that, but it shouldn't. So I think, I don't know, man.
That's a fantastic way to wrap it, though. I think that's a good. I know it's. I don't know, man.
Yeah. It's like this like super like radical academic like diatribe, and then it's like womp womp womp.
Cook each other meals, hang out after the show. Don't just get your check and bounce. This is all important stuff. Music is social. Ba 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 ba. We say it every episode. It's just a fact, and every single guest we have continues to prove our point.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, even talking about like, elder ones being the best hang ever. It's like, yeah, start a band, hang out with your friends.
Yes.
Yeah, and the band, and even if they don't start as your friends, like Alfredo just subbed for Matt at some point, and then we loved him so much I made it a two-horn band. But it's like it's a way to make friends, it's a way to organize, it's a way to do all of the above. That's why censorship is a thing in music and the arts. They know how powerful this stuff is.
That's right. Canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
Jacques Attali, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm. Blah,
All right,
blah, blah.
we gotta call it there for today. We could talk for hours and hours.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you both for doing this and all the many things that you both do, because they're all necessary and they all fit together.
Thank you so much, Amirtha. We will see you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Listening Podcast. The show is created and written by Liz Pelly and myself, Max Albert. And our associate producer and audio engineer is Nick Zanka. You can support the show by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/critical listening, where you'll have early access to episodes before they hit the public platforms, as well as our Discord community. And our theme song is the track Talk to Me by the band Eraser.